Hi everyone, Taya here from Quilting Delights, and I am delighted today to be able to bring you some helpful tips and tricks on one of our newest patterns, Starry Days and Starry Nights. We called it Starry Days and Starry Nights because I wanted to show you how to make a really fun wonky star block, but put it in two different settings with two different colors. So we're going to get started on this right away, and I will tell you that this particular quilt works with 9 colors. That's how we have it set up, but if you want to make it bigger, just bring in more colors and make more stars. Each star takes a fat eighth of fabric, and a fat eighth is a fat quarter cut in half, or a piece of fabric that's 11 by 18. You'll still have a little tiny bit of fabric left over to play with, but that's what it takes to make this block. One of the fun things that happens when we're making this block is that we get an extra set of half square triangles that we're going to use in our borders for both of the quilts. They're just going to be set differently, and we're going to show you how that goes here in just a second. So the first thing we're going to do is take our fabrics, and I know there's a lot of talk about, do you pre-wash the fabric, do you not pre-wash the fabric? We have a couple of customers who are actually allergic to the sizing, whatever that is that they put in fabrics when they manufacture it. So there is a reason to wash fabrics when you need to, but you still need to make them stiff again after you've washed them. So I don't wash my fabrics, but what I do is use Mary Ellen's Best Press, and if I'm doing any machine embroidery on my blocks, I use Material Magic, which makes the fabric as stiff as can be. Now, this doesn't work necessarily with flannel fabrics, but it works really great with cotton fabrics. So the stiffer you can make your fabric in the cutting process, the cleaner your cuts are going to be and the more precise your piecing is going to be. One of the things that I learned a long time ago is that I cannot sew a straight line for love or money, whether I have a ruler or not. So what I do is when I'm sewing, I will sew, but I always square my blocks up. So I don't worry so much about the sewing part because I know I can square up a block or square up a quilt perfectly. So let's focus on that for today, and we'll do a great job with our sewing, but we're going to focus on getting our blocks the right size. And the other thing that I want to mention is that I like to do the same process all at the same time. So for example, I went ahead and cut all of my squares out, cut everything up for my squares, and then I sew the same thing on all 9 squares at the same time, and then I'll press and cut, and then I'll sew the next step all at the same time on all 9 of my blocks, so that when I'm done, all 9 of my blocks are exactly the same. If you sew each block one at a time, you take a chance that maybe your star points are going the opposite direction, or your larger star point, in this case, I like all of mine to be on the right hand side. Well, if you make your blocks separately, then you can take a chance that those are going to be on the left hand side. So let's get started with how to sew our blocks together. So we're ready to start sewing our blocks together after having cut everything. And when I'm cutting and setting up ready to go, I like to make my stacks with every color. So I have my 4 large squares, I have my 4 smaller colored squares. So for each block we have 4 large colored squares, 4 smaller colored squares. I have 8 larger background squares, and I have 1 larger background square for the middle of the block, and you'll see that here in just a second. But notice that I've stacked each one of these by color so that I can do the same thing on every square all the way through. Now, we're going to be sewing the corners of these to a background square. And what I like to do is you can either mark them or you can press them. Sometimes you'll get a fabric that's hard to read where that crease is, but the idea here is we're going to sew just on the outside edge of that line towards the outside of the block. Now, some of you may be asking, why do I have a second line here? Well, this is an awfully big corner to just throw away the rest of the fabric. And so what I did was I sewed another line that's 3/8 of an inch, not quite half an inch, but 3/8 of an inch away, at the same time that I did the block, because then I can cut right down the center and it gives me my half square triangles without having to sew another process. So I love doing this. Now once you've got those lines sewn, the trick here is not to press the fabric too hard away from the corner. We want to match the corner. We want to match the corner. So I'm going to show you a little bit more about that here in just a second. But I've got all of mine stacked up, and you can see that I've already pre-sewn these outside corners on all of them. Now this particular one that I'm doing, I am doing the stars all the same color. If you wanted to, you could do all of the stars with different colors like we've shown in the pattern. It's totally up to you. I don't do scrappy very well unless it's organized, which is why I like 9 blocks, 9 fabrics, because to me it's kind of a game. I can make sure I've got one fabric in each of the 9 fabrics in every star block. So that's what we do to start with. So when you're done sewing, it's going to look something like this. You're going to have your larger background square with the larger colored square. You will have either drawn a line or creased a line with your iron and sewn just to the outside of that line, and then flip it over and sew another line that's just about 3/8 of an inch away. You're going to cut in between those two, and then you're going to press that larger corner away. Notice that we've cut that all out in the back, and it's going to give you a larger block with a snowball corner, and it's going to give you a half square triangle. Now the half square triangles are going to go into the border. So mine, I was able to get a full 3-inch half square triangle out of it, but if you can only get 2 3/4 of an inch half square triangle, that's fine. They're all going to be the same, and I tell you in the pattern how to adjust for that if it's 2 3/4 instead of 3 inches. I have some really fun, helpful hints to make your quilting process more successful. So once we have that done, we're going to take our pieces and we're going to come over here. Now we're ready to sew the second corner on, and I did not keep the second corner of the smaller corner because it was too small for me. Now some of you like doing miniatures, and so you can use that same process, do the line just inside and then do the line 3/8 of an inch. It's going to give you a really tiny little half square triangle, but some of you enjoy doing that, and so go ahead if you'd like to. But when we're all done and we have both corners on, and notice because we're sewing the same thing on each one, our star is going to pivot with the corners in the same area. In other words, they're going to be in the same corner on every block. I'm going to sew my rows together, and I'm going to square it up to 15 inches. That's the target that we're looking for. All of the other measurements for the squares and everything else are in your pattern, so you'll know what size to cut these squares, what size to cut the smaller squares, and what size to put all of this together. Now that these blocks are done, for every square that you sew, you're going to get 4 half square triangles that you can now square up to a single measurement. That measurement could be 3 inches, it could be 2 3/4 inches. Now you can sew all of your squares together, and we're going to get started on our borders. Oops, I just noticed something. I just got done telling you that we want everything in the same corner, and I realized that I accidentally turned this one before I got ready to sew the smaller square on. So that's something that I promise one of you in all of the ones making this quilt, one of you is going to make that mistake. So let's get that straightened out, and as a little bit of a follow-up, we just want to make sure that that large corner is in the same location all the way around, or you will go from a wonky star to a, well, it just won't be pretty, let's just say that. So now my square has been fixed. I can sew my other corner on, and again, I don't sew the second one with 2 lines because I don't like miniature work, but if you like smaller half square triangles, or you are saving those for a friend who likes to, then go ahead and sew that second line. It'll be ready to go. Okay, so we've got our squares, our blocks all made and squared up, and we have them sewn together. It's always nice when you can do opposing seams, but sometimes a block doesn't allow you to do that, and you have to do the best that you can. So in this particular one, most of mine were opposing seams, which means you've got really flat sections where they come together. But all in all, you just want to make sure all of your blocks are the same size when you sew them together, which will give you a quilt top that is the same size. Double check your measurements. Make sure, this is where the tape measure has to come out and the rubber meets the road, because if you don't start out with a square quilt top and you add 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 borders, if you're not measuring and squaring up as you go, you will have a heck of a time getting your quilt flat and able to quilt. So let's talk about this square for just a second. One of the reasons I love this square so much is because the only place I have to match anything is the 4 corners where they come together. All of these star points work out perfectly, and because it's a floating star, it looks great, and every single star point is perfect. That's one of my favorite things about this. Now, we've got our square quilt top all done, and the first thing we're going to do is add a border on the sides and then add a border on the top and bottom. Well, if it's a square quilt, how do you know which are the sides and which are the top and the bottom? Well, the first 2 borders that you put on will help you designate that that is the side of the quilt. And then from there, every other border that you put on is going to match. You're always going to do the short side first and then the longer side second. In this particular case, we're going to add the sides first and then press away from the quilt. And the pattern gives you really good instructions on not only sizing, what your target sizes are, how to press, which direction to press. We're always going to press the path of least resistance. That's my motto for pressing. So in this case, because we've got seams all along the edge here, this first border is going to get pressed away. Now when we add the second border, which is the half square triangle border, we're going to press back into the quilt, because then we don't have any bulk building up in these seams here on the edges. So let's talk about how to put a border on your quilt. Let's say, for the sake of this quilt, if the blocks are all 15 inches and we put them together, the target is going to be 44 inches. So 15 inches, 15 and 15, that's 45 inches. We're going to lose an inch in these 2 seams, putting the quilt together. That makes it 44. So maybe our target is 44 and a half. Maybe you sew a little bit differently and your target is 44 3/4. This is why I never cut my border pieces until I get to the quilt. I've had classes where I have 4 students and every single student comes out with a different measurement for their quilt top before they start putting borders on. The other thing that I like to do is, let's just say that this is a 45-inch quilt top. I don't remember what it is, but it's in the pattern. And I'm going to cut my border strips at least 46 inches in length. Because what I want to do is I want to put a pin at 45 or draw a line. And then I'm going to measure and I'm going to draw another line or put a pin at 45 inches. And I'm going to fit my quilt to my border strip. If it's 45 inches, you're going to do that twice, 1 for each side. Then you're going to press those away from the quilt and square them up. And by squaring up, I just mean you're going to take it to your cutting mat. And once you've pressed this border away, you're going to cut it square with this line. It's really important that you not cut your borders until after you've pressed them away, because you can distort the fabric with the iron. So it's easier just to attach them and then press them away and then trim them. So we're going to do that on the side border and we're going to do that on the top and bottom borders. And then you're going to measure your quilt again, because we need to make sure that it continues to stay square as we add borders. Now I've given you very clear pictures on how to set up this border. So again, if your half square triangles ended up 3 inches, then you're going to do a 3-inch border strip all the way across. If your half square triangles ended up 2 3/4, then the size of this border is going to be 2 3/4. You'll notice just a little bit of math for you. We had 9 squares. We had 4 half square triangles for each one. So we ended up with 36 of the half square triangles. So I've put 9 up and 9 down in both corners. 9 up and 9 across in both corners. And I split them up because, again, I can't do scrappy. I have to have everything organized. I can only do scrappy and random if it's organized. So I took my stack of the half square triangles and I put 2 colors of each on one corner and 2 colors of each on the other corner. That's just how my brain operates. You can do whatever makes you happy, but the goal here is to get these done. So let's not agonize over the little things. You'll notice that there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 on the top, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 on the bottom. So they're actually 9 across and 10 down. It's really important that you notice that. They're 9 across and 10 down, but we've put 9 on each border. So when you make this border, you're going to sew all of these together, end to end. And then you're going to add a strip that is longer than your quilt top. Again, we're going to use the same process. Now on this one, we have to match that corner. We don't have the option of doing anything extra, but we can leave this edge long and measure the sides first and mark your border strip, and then fit that to your quilt top so that it's square on both the side and on the top and bottom. So then we're going to add another 2-inch border, same process, side, top, and bottom. And then we're going to add an accent strip that ends up being 1 inch finished. Now when you get to the accent strip, the question always is, well, which way do I press that? Do I press it away from my quilt? Do I press it into the quilt? Well, my theory on adding an accent border is that because it's a darker color in this situation, it's a darker color than the background, I want to press it in on both sides towards my accent piece. And that creates a really nice ditch on both sides that will pop this border up to the top. So that's how we're going to do that. And add your outside border and make sure, again, you do the sides first and the top and bottom. And then we're going to press this, give it one good press, make sure that it's all the same size. And in the next video, we're going to start working on the quilting. I want to thank you for joining us, and make sure that you go to our YouTube channel, which is YouTube/Quilting Delights, and make sure that you subscribe, ring the bell, and you'll get notified of any future videos that we have coming out. Thanks for your time.